Let's take another look at the StewMac saddle slotting jig. And I just published a video on this yesterday. Had a couple of good questions about it, a couple of good comments, and I thought we should address those. And I also made a couple of modifications to it, which we'll go over. Just a quick, informal video. Okay, first question, first comment someone had was they said, well, I'm adjusting the GoPro here. They said this thing, I tell you, God, this is strong magnets. All right, they said it bends too much. And I know that was a criticism of one of the first jigs. I know, which is why I built mine out of wood the first time, because I researched it, and then quite a few people said that they flex a little bit too much, the plexiglass flex. But I do know that StewMac made some changes to it, because I think they inherited this design from Luthier's Mercantile. I remember seeing this design on Luthier's Mercantile first, if I can remember, 20 years ago, you know. And then showed up at StewMac, and they had some changes and things like that. But anyway, one of the criticisms of it on the forums and various other luthiers that I do know a couple of other people, it did have flex. So I made mine out of plywood, and another person commented, they said, yeah, all my jigs are just hodgepodges that I had to put together. Yeah, mine too, you know. I needed a jig for a saddle slot, so I just put something together to play with it and see how I liked it. And well, I ended up using it for over 20 years. But mine does not have the nice adjustments, and that's part of the reason that I bought this one. Is aside from spending my money on tools rather than the tax man, I wanted to see how it works. You know, that's educational in itself. What are some design things in here that I like, and what are some things that I might change if I was going to build one myself? What things would I keep? What things would I change? So I'm not unaware of the flex comment, but my understanding was that StewMac had changed the router design, and I think what they did was they added this stepped base right here, which spreads out the force. If I recall, it used to have a much narrower base that actually slid. That's the way my wooden one is. My wooden has rails on the sides, and then it has a platform underneath, so you sit down on the base directly. And I think I have mine sideways like this, so I have it pretty stiff, you know. It'll probably flex if you push on it, but it's, you know, 3/4 inch plywood. But anyway, I think they made this design change, and I think it was this router base here, so that this is double thick right here, and it's got a very wide surface right here. This is nice and stiff, and it's big. So obviously, the bigger that base is, the more you're going to spread your weight out. If the base was very small and you had your weight, that router is heavy. If you had it focused in the middle, yeah, it would spread, but it's spread out. I mean, it would sink, but it's spread out over a big area. So if you set this thing on here, even when it's sitting in the middle, like right here, the base is coming out. It basically splits it in thirds, you know. So the only time it's really going to be out in the weakest spot of this jig is when it's right there in the middle. Any other time, it's spreading over here to the edges, which are pretty firm. So I don't know. When this jig is in my hand, yeah, you know, I can bend it. But when it's clamped on the guitars, I've got support here and I've got support here, and you can push down over here. It flexes a tiny amount, but I'm really pushing on that. Okay, so let's bring this camera down here, and I'll show you a couple of things. We're going to look at the flex on it, and then I'm going to show you modification. I should go ahead and show you the modification I made now, so you don't sit there this whole time wondering what that is, okay? When I'm cutting a long saddle slot, the bridge is higher over here on the base side. Where's the bridge? Here's the bridge. Here's the bridge. The bridge is taller on the base side, so it's typically about 320 over here, and then about 280 or so over here. If you cut straight across like this, your slot is too shallow over here on the treble side. So you have to angle your router. So if you cut like this, you can see it's going to be too shallow over here on the treble side. So you're going to go farther out into the wings over here, and you're going to be over here. You've got to cut parallel to the top of the bridge, not with the bottom of the bridge. You've got to cut parallel with the top of it. So you're not going parallel with the bottom, you're going parallel with the top. I'm exaggerating. You're going like this. Therefore, you got to raise the base shot up so that the router bit just absolutely kisses the top and kisses the top over here. And every bridge is a little bit different, and you may have to adjust that. That's why in the old days, they cut these on a table saw, and they laid them down like this, and they had a fence right here that was angled for the compensation, and zip, and you end up with a nice straight slot relative to the top of the bridge, not the bottom of the bridge. So the problem with the StewMac jig here is that everything is in relation to the top of the guitar, which matches the bottom of the saddle. So if this is all flat with respect to the top of the guitar, you're going to end up cutting the bass side too deep. Now, if you think about it, this is also true of a short saddle slot too. It doesn't matter if the saddle slot goes through or not. It's just that it's more apparent when you're using a long saddle slot, because you can see the ends right here. And if you do this right, you want those ends to be approximately the same amount off into the wings right here. You don't want one coming down farther and the other one shorter, because it doesn't look right. It doesn't look vintage. Vintage is where it's at. All right, but the same is true of a short slot. So if you're cutting parallel to the top, then you're going to end up with a shallower slot on the treble side. And you don't want that, because sometimes the saddle ends up being taller on the treble side, depending on the geometry and the neck and things like that. So you really want, no matter what bridge it is, I want a deeper slot. Deeper slot? Yeah, it's a deeper slot on the treble side. It's shallower on the bass side, deeper over here, so that it matches the top. You see what I'm saying here? Your router comes down and it's deeper on the treble side. Even though deeper is the wrong word to use, because when you measure it from the top, it's going to be the same depth, okay? But it's closer to the bottom of the bridge over here than it is over here, okay? Whatever. If you ever do this once or twice, you'll see what I mean. All right, so I want that slot to follow the contours of the top and not the bottom. Therefore, the StewMac jig does not do that. It's flat and goes across. So I needed to angle it. Now my personal wooden jig is already pre-angled. I've got pads on it, cork pads over here on the side, and I don't clamp them on front to rear like the StewMac jig does. I clamp them on the sides. So I'm able to pivot, you see. If I try to pivot this, it's going to twist, and that's not what we want to do. I almost want to clamp this over here on the sides, and I might end up doing that. What I should do is just drill screw holes to the top of the guitar and clamp, I wouldn't do that, But my jig works like that because I'm clamping over here. I'm actually coming with clamps through the sound hole, and I'm clamping here through the sound hole, which has its own issues. But mine's able to pivot like this. And it's also able to pivot this way easily because I just stick something under here and clamp, okay? When you clamp it front and rear, kind of inhibits that. So your angle is going to come from this tray that's movable here. So like I described before, this tray slides back and forth, and that's how you do your adjustments. So what I did, I put some feeler gauges under here. Let's take a look at those. I put feeler gauges under here, and because then that angles this table, it resulted in a small gap up under here. So just for now, you understand, I put feeler gauges under here, and of course the gap varies depending on where you are. So there's more gap over here, there's a little less gap over here. The weakest spot's going to be in the middle. So I just took these feeler gauges and kind of pushed them over there to get just a little bit of tension and puts tension on it. I did the same thing over here just because I had extra feeler gauges. Slide around there until they put a little bit of tension and then stop. After I use this for a while, and so I had to put 3 feeler gauges in there, and if I can recall, I know that's a 13, and the next one's a 7. I think I have about 40 or 45 thousandths of an inch with the feeler gauges under here. And the way I set that up was to take the router right here and make the bit just barely kiss the top of the curve right here. Just barely touch that curve. And then I pulled it over here, and when it's flat, it's hitting like about right there. Boom. So then I started stacking feeler gauges up in there until it just barely touched right here. So the router bit just barely kissed it right there. This side changed a little bit, but not too much, you know. But I went back and forth, and I checked these back and forth until I get the bit just barely kissing the top on both sides. And God, that's a loud car. And that's what I want. So this ended up being about 40 thousandths of an inch of feeler gauges. So after I test this for a little while, and I've decided that that's what I want, I think there's a good chance I'll probably just tape or super glue or stick these on here permanently so I don't have to deal with it. I could also just leave them in there because it's not like I'm going to take the jig apart. All I'm going to do is slide them back and forth. But these little guys over here, I might end up doing something a little bit more permanent. Now, that tightens up the front, but the back is still, you can see the flex a little bit right there. I'm pushing down pretty hard. Pushing down pretty hard on that. And you can see that flex. So what I'm probably going to do is cut these in half because these are sacrifice feeler gauges. And I will just stick them on both sides. And, you know, there it'll go, you know. I'll make 2 sets of feeler gauges. I'll go buy another set of feeler gauges and stick them in here. But I'm not worried about it too much because it doesn't bother me if the router tilts backwards just a little bit. So in other words, if this flexes a little bit back here and causes the router to tilt back a little bit, that's okay. I don't mind having a saddle slot that is angled backwards, 3 to 5 degrees. It counteracts the string tension, and as the saddle gets taller, it automatically compensates a little bit. This is something the violins do, and it's what I do on mandolin bridges too. I angle it backwards just a little bit. My jig is also like that. It's got a little bit more this way. I could very easily put something up under here, put some angles down in here to bring this whole jig up a little bit. And I might end up doing that. We'll see. Okay? But that's what I have right now. And that's the modifications that I've made to this so far. Now, the question we really want to answer here, we want to look at, is does it flex? I've reduced a lot of the flex right now by just putting stuff under here. So let's look at this real close. I'm going to adjust my GoPro down here. Sorry about this. Jiggling and everything. Let's put the GoPro right here. That's pretty good, I think. Now let's push down on this, okay? So I'm pushing pretty hard right in the middle. I can see the top moving. That's very, very minimal flex. I'm pushing hard. Now here it flexes a little bit, but like I said, I'm not so worried about that because when I do the router, for one thing, I was taught that you don't really push the router down in the middle, and nor do you balance it in between the poles, but you slide it to one side or another, this way or that way, consistently. So when I work the router, I come over here and I push this way so that it's going on one side. Because a router will always slide just a little bit, and this is pretty tight. This is pretty good tolerance. But you can see that rocking motion right there. It'll never fit exactly. So you always push on one side or the other. And you be consistent about that, you know. So I'm probably going to push on the front side right over here, which means that my weight is on this rail, and I'm going like this, and so there's not even any weight on this back rail. I'm not worried about it flexing that much. A lot of router jigs don't even have a back side. They've just got a front side. And you put it on here and you balance it and you go across. So, you know, I'm not worried about flex back here. I don't see Also, let's just move this across. I've got to readjust this now. I've got to get my bit out of the way. So let me raise that up so it'll clear the top. There we go. I'm clearing the top. So you watch this and you tell me if you think that's moving. So when I'm doing this in practice, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to push it this way. I'm going to put my tension on this side like this. And I'm going to bring it across. This is where I'm always going to push my tension, and I push in this direction. So like that. If that thing's moving, man, it's minimal. I'm sure you could stiffen it up. It wouldn't be bad, you know, to go ahead and put some shims up underneath here. You could do stuff like that, but that's pretty acceptable for a handheld deal if you ask me. All right, let's look at this now. Here's the other thing that I'm going to do. We were talking about this and someone said something about tape. And I thought, yeah, that's a good way to do it, because I always have, as soon as they said tape, I immediately figured that out. And what you do is you put your tape like this. So here's my hole, and I want the router bit to cut that off. I want the router bit to go right down that and right down that. This is hard to see when you're looking in there trying to line everything up. But if you put a piece of tape like this so that it bisects that hole and bisects that hole, I've got a nice solid line now. And I can put the router bit here, and I can put the router bit here, and the tape is so much easier to see than the bare wood, which I've done forever. And on my jig's a lot more open, so it is easy to see the bit. It's easy to see the bit and exactly where it contacts. It was not so easy to see on this router base, and I mentioned that, and I already keyholed it like this. You see, I cut this keyhole out here, and now I'm going to drop this on the guitar. Now when I'm looking at it, I can see down there, and I can see the tip of the bit. And that makes it a lot easier. I cut one yesterday with it like that, and it was so much easier to look down there and see it. Now with the tape, I have another linings. I have another solid marker, so I'll show you what I mean here. I think this is adjusted. Yeah, should be pretty close. I messed with it a minute ago. So I guess we're going to check it and find out. So I'm going to bring this down. We're going to get down here. I'm going to look at it. I'm going to get the treble. I can still see the hole right there, so that's good. Right there. Okay, so bring the camera over there, so I'll show you. I think you can see the bit down in there. I'm going to move this around just a little bit, make sure we get that angle. And then we're going to move it across, and it's hitting the bridge as it should. But you can see right there, boom, there's the hole. I think we got it. There's the hole, there's the bit. But in either case, you can see the tape. And you can see half of that blade going onto the tape and half of it going onto the wood. So I'm pretty happy with that. Okay? All right. So that's the second look at the StewMac jig. And yeah, there's a couple things I'm going to modify now. Before I turn this router on, I don't want those, obviously I don't want those feeler gauges coming loose and flying all over the place. So I'm going to tape them down right here. Put a little tape on them. I'll show you what I'm doing. I sure that I already got a lot better ideas. I'm just showing you the stuff as I'm thinking on my feet here, so you can see the thought process going on. So I'm going to take these down so they don't move. And I got plenty of clearance right there, but the bit's clear over there. They're going to have to really slide, but they'll be all right there. I'm not worried about these because they clamp down. So again, after I decide if I like this or not, I may or may not make this more permanent. I might just leave those taped on there because, you know, if this setup works for this bridge, but if another bridge is 20 thousandths of an inch taller over here, and varies just a little bit. It's not going to kiss it the same, so I might need to adjust this a little bit. I know on my clamp, there's been a few cases where I've had to like loosen this one just a little bit, bring it up, put a couple pieces of paper into there. I've had to adjust it just a little bit to get it right. So, all right, I'm going to cut this, and then we'll come back and take a look at it before I shut this off. There's my first pass, and I did the super shallow right here. Just barely hit it, but you can see my blade is going right through the middle of that hole. It's back just a little bit on the treble side, but that's okay. I've got a little bit of room to work with, and that's not bad, and it is still cutting through the hole. It's still bisecting it. It's just not perfectly bisecting it, but that's okay, because this one comes back just, that was getting a little bit close to the front, and so scooting that slot back just a tiny bit isn't going to hurt anything. Now I'm going to do more passes to cut deeper. All right, there's my second pass, and what I'm talking about right here is, you see that slot is just coming out right there, and over here on the treble side, it's doing the same thing. It's just barely coming out. It's still just a tiny bit deeper over here on the base side, but that's not bad. That's pretty close, really. I mean, look at it from the top. It's coming out that much, I mean, I'm pretty happy with that, They were never perfect back in the old days either. So that's pretty good. So I'm happy with that, and I'm cutting that directly in half now. We're good, and we're going to sink it. All right, there we go. There's my slot. Took me 3 passes. You can see that much slot on this side, that much slot on that side. That looks real good to me. Again, it's just no, that looks pretty good. Might be just tiny bit farther out on that base side, but on the whole, pretty good. I like the tape. That's the first time I've actually had to do that. Like I said, on my jig, I can see it really good because it's so open. So pull that out, and there we go. So we have pretty nice looking saddle slot right there. Okay, and so again, those are my modifications to this jig. That worked really good. That got me a really nice angle on that. Now I'm going to see how permanent I'm going to make this. I'm going to probably just leave that for a while. I was pretty happy with the way this works, I don't see a lot of flexion there. I mean, certainly not enough to make me concerned. It's not bowing and curving or anything like that. I will lay a straight edge in the bottom of that, and we will find out. Except I don't have a straight edge that thin here. My good straight edges are elsewhere. Let's look at this one. I've been using it over here, but I think this is more than 3/32 of an inch. Oh, it is. Fits perfectly. Oh, that saddle would be too tall. No, that's a joke. Yeah, that's my new StewMac saddle. The thing about a bridge like that, a piece of wood is always going to form a little bit to the saddle over time. And on a long vintage saddle like this, I'm always going to glue it in. That just looks good to me. So I'm happy. Are you happy? Doesn't matter. Main thing is I'm happy with it. So using the jig a little bit more, not perfect, for me, but it's easily modified, and I'm sure I could find a more long-term solution to this. What would really be nice is if you need to have this whole thing here at a wedge, so that it's totally supported. You could cut that, but if you cut that wedge into it, you're not going to have any adjustability. So honestly, sticking the feeler gauges in here like I did is a pretty good solution. It stiffens it up a lot right here. It stiffens that up, and you can put feeler gauges and wedges and things like that, just like working on a door. You're going to wedge that frame over and get it where you want, and then you nail it in. You can never drop a door frame perfectly, and never. You're going to put a frame in there, and you're always going to wedge it here and there, and then you put the facing on it, which is the purpose of the facing. So, same thing here. I want the ability to manipulate it a little bit the way I want it. So, I like the jig. I wish it was a lot cheaper because I'm just such a stingy person. But I'm glad I have it. It's working really good on here. It was a piece of cake to set up, much easier than I thought it was going to be. And once again, I like what this does right here. It's to backing up the plate and also giving you the precision to back this up, put feeler gauges in, reset this, and then pull that plate back to it. That's pretty slick now that I've seen how that works. But I rarely have to move it. I'm always doing 3/32 of an inch cut, and that's it, you know. So I think that 12-string guitar that I did the other day with the 1/8 of an inch, that's the first time I have done that forever. All right, back to work.